June floated in the maintenance shaft of the International Space Station, Harmony. His tools were neatly attached to his belt with small magnetic clips. He hummed a tune as he fixed a broken air filter. After 5 months in space, these repairs had become routine for him. Control, this is Engineer Kim. Air filter in Section E is almost done, Jum said into his headset. Copy that, Engineer Kim. Good work, a voice replied from the control room. Suddenly, a loud alarm blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors. June quickly closed the filter panel and pushed himself toward the main hall. Control, what's happening? He asked, his heart beating faster. Unknown spacecraft. Approaching, Engineer Kim. It's not on any flight plan. Please get to the emergency shelter immediately. June was about to follow orders when a second message came through. Wait, it's sending a signal. Not hostile. It's requesting to dock. June stopped moving. Dock? Is it one of ours? Negative. Design is unlike anything we've seen before. Captain Lee's voice cut in. All crew, report to the main viewing area. We may be making history today. June pushed himself through the station corridors, joining the other 11 crew members at the large window that faced the docking port. Outside, a sleek silver craft hovered. It was about the size of a small bus, but shaped like a water droplet. No visible engines. No visible seams. It seemed to glow slightly with a blue light. Is it aliens? Someone whispered. Captain Lee looked at his tablet. They're transmitting in perfect English, requesting permission to dock for cultural exchange purposes. The room fell silent. What do we do? Asked Dr. Park, the station biologist. Captain Lee straightened his uniform. We follow first contact protocols, and we remember we represent all of humanity. He pressed a button on his tablet. Unknown craft. This is Captain Lee of the International Space Station Harmony. We grant permission to dock. Please follow our guidance system. To everyone's surprise, the craft smoothly connected to their docking port with no help needed. The airlock cycle began automatically. How did they know our systems? Joan wondered aloud. Everyone held their breath as the inner door of the airlock slid open. Standing there was what appeared to be a young woman. At first glance, she looked human, about 160 centimeters tall with a slim build. But as she stepped into the light, the differences became clear. Her skin had a slight purple tint and seemed to shimmer when she moved. Her black hair floated around her head as if underwater, even in the station's artificial gravity. Her eyes were just slightly too large, and their color shifted between green and blue. Greetings, she said in perfect English with no accent. I am Hannah, Synobiologist of the Stellar Commonwealth. I come in peace and friendship. Captain Lee stepped forward. Welcome aboard, Hannah. I am Captain Lee. This is unexpected. Hannah smiled. Her teeth were white, and even almost too perfect. Is it? We've been watching your broadcasts for decades. Your species has been practically shouting into space since your radio technology developed. We've been waiting for the right moment to say hello. And that moment is now. Dr. Park asked. Yes, your species has reached a critical development stage. Your permanent presence in space shows you're ready to join the wider community of intelligent life. Hannah looked around at them all. Don't worry, we come as friends and teachers, not conquerors. The Commonwealth believes all intelligent species should develop at their own pace. Captain Lee gestured to the conference room. Perhaps we should talk more comfortably. As they floated toward the room, Jun noticed Hannah moved with unusual grace, as if she had been in zero gravity her whole life. In the conference room, Hannah explained that the Stellar Commonwealth was a group of 15 spacefaring species who shared knowledge and resources. Earth has been in our observation program for several centuries, she said. Your recent technological progress has been impressive. The Commonwealth believes it's time for initial contact and cultural exchange. Why you? Asked Dr. Park. Why not a diplomat or leader? Hannah turned to her. Because I study biology and behavior, my species looks most similar to humans, which makes first contact less shocking. And I volunteered because I find humans fascinating. What exactly do you want? Captain Lee asked directly. To learn from you, and to share some basic knowledge in return, Hannah replied. I'll stay on your station for 1 Earth month as the first step. If all goes well, more extensive exchanges will follow. After many more questions, Captain Lee stepped out to communicate with Earth governments. The news of first contact would soon spread worldwide, but for now, the station crew had the privilege of being humanity's first ambassadors. When Captain Lee returned, he looked serious. Earth authorities have approved the visit. Engineer Kim will be Hannah's guide during her stay. June's mouth fell open. Me? Why me? Your psychological profile shows high adaptability and openness to new experiences, Captain Lee said. Plus, you know the station's systems better than anyone. Hannah looked at June with her color-shifting eyes. I look forward to learning from you, Engineer Kim. Just June is fine, he said nervously. After the meeting, June showed Hannah to her quarters, a small room normally used for storage that they quickly converted for her use. Do you need any special environmental conditions? He asked. Different air mix? Temperature? No, my species is highly adaptable. Your standard conditions are comfortable for me. She looked around the simple room with its sleeping bag attached to the wall. This will be perfect. So, what should I show you first? June asked awkwardly. Everything, Hannah said with enthusiasm. But perhaps start with your daily routines. I'm most interested in how humans live and work in space. Over the next few days, June showed Hannah around the station. She watched as the crew performed experiments, exercised to prevent muscle loss, prepared meals, and maintained the station's systems. She took notes on a device like a small glass tablet that seemed to respond to her thoughts. Hannah was particularly interested in human technology. Charmingly innovative, she called it, which June wasn't sure was a compliment. Your species creates such creative solutions despite your limitations, she explained when he asked. You don't have unified scientific knowledge like the Commonwealth, so you've had to discover everything yourselves. It's impressive. On the 4th day, as they ate lunch together, Hannah asked, What made you become a space engineer, June? He thought for a moment. When I was a child, I watched the first humans land on Mars. I decided then that I wanted to help build humanity's future in space. A worthy goal, she said. My people believe that exploration is one of the highest callings. What about you? June asked. Why study alien species? To understand the amazing variety of life, she answered simply. Each intelligent species solves the problems of existence differently. By studying those differences, we learn more about the universe and ourselves. By the end of the first week, the crew had grown more comfortable with Hannah's presence. She joined their meals and recreation time, asking endless questions about human culture, history, and biology. On the 8th day, June received a message from Captain Lee. Her superiors have sent more information. They believe Hannah's species and humans have enough biological similarities to make this a particularly valuable study. Focus on daily human behaviors and physical needs. That evening, as June worked on a circuit panel, Hannah floated beside him, watching intently. Your hands are very skilled, she observed. Years of practice, he replied. What about your people? Do you have specialized jobs like we do? Yes, but we train for multiple roles. I'm a xenobiologist, but also trained in stellar navigation and diplomacy. She paused. There's something my superiors didn't tell you. June stopped working. What's that? One major difference between our species. My kind has evolved beyond the need for sleep. We can rest specific parts of our brain in rotation, while remaining fully conscious and aware. You never sleep? June asked, amazed. Never. Never, she confirmed. Which is why I'm so interested in studying human physiology. Your biological needs may seem like limitations to you, but they've shaped your culture and thinking in unique ways. As June considered this revelation, he didn't realize that his normal human need for sleep was about to become the focus of Hannah's research and the source of her greatest confusion about humanity. 3 weeks had passed since Hannah arrived on the space station. She followed June everywhere, watching him work and asking many questions. The crew had gotten used to seeing the alien woman floating through the corridors, her shimmering skin catching the light. Hannah had learned much about human technology and behavior. She knew how the air recycling system worked. She understood human food preparation. She even joined in when the crew played card games during free time. But there was still one human routine that confused her. Every night at 10:00 p.m. station time, something strange happened. The lights dimmed. The crew went to their sleeping quarters. And then, for 8 hours, they became completely unresponsive. Hannah had noticed this pattern, but hadn't yet seen what happened when humans were in this state. Her own species never fully lost consciousness. They could rest parts of their brain in rotation while staying aware of their surroundings. The idea of becoming completely vulnerable and unaware seemed dangerous and illogical. Tonight, Hannah decided to find out what really happened during this mysterious night shift. "June, may I ask you something?" she said as they finished the evening meal. "Of course," June replied, putting away his tray. "What exactly do you do during the night cycle? Everyone disappears for 8 hours. Is it some kind of meditation? Or a private ritual?" June looked surprised. "We sleep. Don't your people sleep?" Sleep. The word was familiar to Hannah from Earth broadcasts, but she didn't fully understand the concept. "You mean the unconscious state? I thought that was only for healing injuries or illness." "No, we need to sleep every day," June explained. "All humans do. Without it, we get sick. Our brains need time to process information, and our bodies need to rest." Hannah's color-shifting eyes widened. "You become unconscious every single day. For 8 hours. That's a third of your life." "I guess I never thought about it that way," June said with a small laugh. "It's just normal for us." "May I observe this process?" Hannah asked carefully. "For my research." June hesitated. "Well, there's not much to see. I just lie there with my eyes closed. But if it helps your study, you can watch me fall asleep, I suppose." Later that night, June prepared for bed in his small private quarters. Hannah sat on a stool, watching with great interest as he changed into sleeping clothes, brushed his teeth, and climbed into his sleeping bag attached to the wall. "So now you just shut down?" she asked. "Pretty much," June said with a yawn. "It usually takes a few minutes. My brain will slow down, then I'll lose consciousness." "Fascinating," Hannah whispered. "And you're completely defenseless during this time." "I guess so," June said, his eyes already getting heavy. "That's why we sleep in safe places. Good night, Hannah." "Good night," she replied, though the concept of a good night made little sense to her. How could a period of unconsciousness be good? Hannah watched as June's breathing slowed. His eyes closed. Soon, he made no response when she softly said his name. She waved her hand in front of his face. "Nothing." "Incredible," she murmured. "Total shutdown." She stayed for an hour, observing with growing concern. June's eyes sometimes moved rapidly beneath his eyelids. His breathing changed rhythm occasionally. Once, he made a small sound and shifted position. "This seems dangerous," Hannah thought. How did humans survive as a species with this vulnerability? The next morning, when June woke up, he found Hannah still sitting in his room, her glass tablet filled with notes. "Have you been here all night?" he asked, surprised. "Yes, I found the process too fascinating to leave," she said. "You were completely unaware of your surroundings for 7.8 hours. At one point, I dropped a tool accidentally, and you didn't respond at all, even though it made a loud noise." June stretched and yawned. "That's because I was asleep. It's normal." "But what if there had been danger? A fire? A hostile intruder?" "That's what alarms are for," June explained. Loud noises will wake us up in emergencies. Hannah shook her head, still confused. You mentioned your eyes moving. What was happening then? Oh, that's called REM sleep, rapid eye movement. It's when we dream. Dream? Hannah tilted her head. What is that? June thought for a moment. Dreams are like stories or experiences our brain creates while we sleep. Sometimes they make sense. Sometimes they're strange. Sometimes we remember them when we wake up. Sometimes we don't. Hannah looked fascinated. Your brain creates experiences while unconscious. What purpose does that serve? Scientists think it helps us process memories and emotions, June said as he got ready for the day. Some dreams help us work through problems or fears. Throughout that day, Hannah asked everyone on the crew about sleep and dreams. Dr. Park explained the science of sleep cycles. Captain Lee described how sleep schedules were managed on the station. Engineer Yoon told Hannah about a recurring dream where he could fly. That evening, Hannah sent a report to her superiors in the Stellar Commonwealth. Humans have a major biological limitation that was not in our initial assessment. They require a daily period of complete unconsciousness lasting approximately 8 Earth hours. During this time, they are extremely vulnerable. Their brain functions continue, but in an altered state they call dreaming, which seems to serve psychological rather than survival purposes. This represents approximately 33% of their total lifespan, spent in a defenseless condition. I find it difficult to understand how a species with this requirement survived predators and natural threats during their evolution. The next day, Hannah received a reply. Her superiors were equally baffled by human sleep requirements. They requested more specific data on sleep patterns and the apparent wastefulness of the process. They questioned whether humans might be less advanced than initially thought. For the next few nights, Hannah observed different crew members sleeping. She measured their vital signs, brain activity, and responsiveness. She collected dream reports when they woke. She compiled a detailed study of human sleep behavior. On the 5th night, she decided to observe June again. This time, something unexpected happened. As June fell into deep sleep, his breathing became very slow and quiet. Too quiet. Hannah's instruments showed his oxygen levels dropping slightly. Was this normal? She didn't know. Concerned, she touched his shoulder. June, she said softly. No response. June, she said louder, shaking him slightly. Still nothing. Worried that something was wrong, Hannah shook him harder. June, wake up. June suddenly jerked awake with a startled shout. He flailed his arms, disoriented, and pushed away from the wall. In the zero gravity, this sent him floating across the small room where he bumped into the opposite wall. What's happening? He gasped, his heart racing. Is there an emergency? Hannah looked alarmed. Your breathing became very slow. I was concerned you might be in distress. June rubbed his face, now fully awake. I was just in deep sleep. That's normal. You can't wake someone up like that unless there's actual danger. It's frightening. I apologize, Hannah said, looking genuinely sorry. I don't understand this sleep state. It seemed like you might be in trouble. June sighed. It's okay. But now I'm wide awake, and it's the middle of the night cycle. Is that bad? It means I'll be tired tomorrow. Sleep interruption affects our performance. We need continuous sleep to function properly. Hannah's eyes widened. So not only do you need to shut down, but the shutdown must be uninterrupted. This seems like a serious design flaw in human biology. June couldn't help but laugh. I guess it might seem that way to you, but it's just how we are. The next morning, June was noticeably tired. He moved more slowly. He yawned frequently. He made a small error while repairing a circuit panel, something he never did when well rested. See, Hannah said, pointing at his mistake. Your performance is compromised, all because your consciousness was interrupted during your shutdown period. How do humans accomplish anything with such limitations? June smiled despite his fatigue. We manage. And sleep isn't all bad. Sometimes I wake up with solutions to problems I couldn't solve the day before. It's like my brain worked on them while I was asleep. Hannah looked thoughtful. That's interesting. So your unconscious mind continues problem solving even when you're unaware. Sometimes, yes, Joan said. It's one of the mysteries of human sleep that scientists still study. Hannah made notes on her tablet. Perhaps there was more to this strange human shutdown than she had first thought. But she still couldn't imagine ever willingly becoming so vulnerable and unaware. How could a species survive like this? She didn't know that soon a crisis would give her a new perspective on human sleep and the surprising strengths it might provide. The space station Harmony rotated slowly against the backdrop of stars. Inside, most of the crew was fast asleep. It was 2:17 a.m. station time, the middle of the night cycle. Hannah floated in the observation room, looking out at Earth below. Since her species didn't need sleep, night hours were perfect for her research. She had been on the station for almost a month now, and still found human sleep habits fascinating and strange. While everyone else was unconscious in their sleeping quarters, Hannah used this quiet time to send reports to the Stellar Commonwealth and organize her research data. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the station. Hannah's sensitive ears picked up the sound of metal tearing. A moment later, alarms began to blare. Red emergency lights flashed in every corridor. Warning! Hull breach, DETCTV in Siktion F. Ox Eladine Leveils Didoropegang. All Karibu are priority to emergency stations. The station's AI repeated this message as Hannah pushed herself quickly through the corridors toward Section F. She knew that was where the main life support systems were located. Captain Lee appeared from his quarters, still in his sleeping clothes but instantly alert. What happened? He asked when he saw Hannah. Unknown, she replied. I heard a loud impact. The captain checked his tablet. Micrometeoroid strike. It hit the outer hull of Section F and damaged the primary oxygen recycling system. By now, other crew members were emerging from their quarters. Some looked alert, but others seemed confused and slow-moving. Hannah noticed how different humans were when suddenly woken from deep sleep. They blinked heavily, moved clumsily, and took several minutes to fully understand what was happening. Damage report, Captain Lee demanded into his communicator. Primary oxygen system is offline, reported the engineer on duty. Secondary system is running, but showing strain. We have about 2 hours before it fails too. How long to repair the primary system? The captain asked. Unknown, sir. We need Engineer Kim to assess. He knows that system best. Captain Lee turned to Hannah. Find June. We need him at Section F immediately. Hannah nodded and pushed herself quickly through the corridors to June's quarters. She pressed the emergency entry button, and the door slid open. Inside, June was still asleep despite the blaring alarms and flashing lights. Hannah found this incredible. How could humans remain unconscious during such obvious danger signals? June, she called, shaking his shoulder. June, wake up. The station is damaged. June stirred slightly but didn't wake. Hannah shook him harder. June, the primary oxygen system is failing. The crew needs you. Finally, June's eyes opened. He looked around, confused. What's happening? Micrometeoroid strike. Hannah explained quickly. Section F is damaged. The oxygen recycling system is offline. Captain Lee says you are needed immediately. June rubbed his eyes, trying to process this information through the fog of interrupted deep sleep. Hannah watched impatiently as his brain struggled to shift from unconsciousness to emergency mode. How can you be slower when you just had rest? She asked, genuinely baffled. That's not how it works, June mumbled, pulling himself out of his sleeping bag. Being woken suddenly from deep sleep makes it worse, not better. Hannah didn't understand, but there was no time to discuss it. We must hurry. The secondary system will only last 2 hours. This seemed to finally cut through Jung's sleepy haze. His eyes widened. 2 hours. That's all. He quickly put on his uniform and pushed himself toward the door. Let's go. They raced through the corridors, joining Captain Lee and the rest of the engineering team at Section F. The damaged area was sealed off behind emergency doors. Through a small window, they could see that part of the wall was crumpled inward where the micrometeoroid had struck. The impact damaged the main oxygen processing unit, explained Engineer Yoon. We've sealed the breach, but the system is offline. June studied the diagrams on a tablet. Despite being woken from deep sleep just minutes ago, Hannah noticed his eyes were now focused and alert. We need to bypass the damaged section and reroute through the backup channels, June said. But those channels weren't designed for primary use. We'll need to modify them. Can it be done in 2 hours? Captain Lee asked. June thought for a moment. Yes, but I'll need help. Captain Lee looked around. Who has the necessary skills? Hannah, Jum said, surprising everyone. She learns quickly, and her hands are steadier than anyone else's. Hannah blinked in surprise. But I don't know your technology well enough. I'll guide you, Jum said. There's no time to explain everything, but you can follow instructions. Your species' continuous consciousness should be an advantage right now. Captain Lee nodded. Do it. The rest of us will prepare emergency oxygen supplies in case you fail. June and Hannah put on spacesuits as they would need to enter the depressurized section where the damage had occurred. Before they entered, Jun showed Hannah diagrams of the oxygen system and explained what they needed to do. We need to disconnect these 3 main lines. He pointed to the diagram. Then connect them to these auxiliary channels here. But the auxiliary channels need to be modified to handle the increased flow. Hannah studied the diagrams. I understand the concept, but I've never worked with your technology. Just follow my lead, Jun said, and be ready to learn fast. They entered the airlock, and the air was pumped out. Then the inner door opened, and they floated into the damaged section. The wall showed a small but devastating impact point where the micrometeoroid had struck. The oxygen processing unit nearby was badly damaged, with broken pipes and twisted metal. We need to work quickly, Jun said through the suit radio. Oxygen levels for the rest of the station are dropping faster than expected. They began work, with June giving clear instructions and Hannah following precisely. Her alien dexterity proved helpful as they disconnected damaged components and began modifying the backup channels. Your hands are steadier than mine, June observed as Hannah soldered a delicate connection. My species evolved for fine detail work, she explained. But your knowledge is what's saving us now. As they worked, Hannah noticed something interesting. Despite being abruptly woken from deep sleep, Jun was now functioning at full capacity. His problem-solving abilities seemed especially sharp. He found creative solutions to problems they encountered, thinking of alternatives when parts were damaged beyond repair. How did you know to try that? Hannah asked after June figured out a way to bypass a completely destroyed section using parts from a different system. I'm not sure, June admitted as they continued working. It just came to me. Sometimes solutions appear in my mind when I'm not actively thinking about them. An hour into their work, they encountered a serious problem. A critical valve was damaged, and there was no replacement on the station. We need that valve, Jum said, his voice tense. Without it, the whole bypass is useless. Hannah watched as Jum closed his eyes for a moment. She thought he might be giving up, but then his eyes snapped open. Wait, there's another way, he said suddenly. We can modify the water filtration valve from Life Support Section B. The threading is different, but we can create an adapter using parts from the damaged unit. How did you think of that? Hannah asked, amazed. I remembered fixing the water system last month. June explained as they quickly moved to implement his solution. The parts are different, but the function is similar. They worked frantically, racing against time as the station's oxygen levels continued to drop. With just 30 minutes left before the secondary system would fail, they made the final connections. "Ready?" Jun asked, his hand on the activation switch. Hana nodded. "Ready." Jun flipped the switch. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a hum, the bypass system came to life. Indicators turned from red to green as oxygen began flowing through the modified channels. "Captain," Jun called over the radio. "Primary oxygen system is back online through the bypass. We did it." Cheers could be heard over the communication system. As Jun and Hana made their way back through the airlock, Hana couldn't help but wonder about what she had witnessed. This human, who required an unconscious shutdown period every day, who had been confused and slow when first awakened, had just solved complex problems under extreme pressure. The same biology she had considered a weakness had somehow produced remarkable results. "I don't understand," she said as they removed their spacesuits. "How were you able to think so clearly? You were barely able to wake up an hour ago." Jun smiled tiredly. "Crisis adrenaline helps. But also I think my brain had been working on station problems even while I slept. I remembered that valve because I dreamed about the water system last week." "You solved problems while unconscious?" Hana asked incredulously. "Sometimes our best thinking happens when we're not actively thinking," Jun replied. "That's one thing sleep gives us that your species might be missing." As the crisis subsided and the crew celebrated their narrow escape, Hana began to wonder if there was more to this strange human shutdown than she had first believed. A week had passed since the oxygen system crisis. The space station Harmony had returned to normal operations, though repair work continued in Section F. Hana had been quiet, spending more time observing the crew and less time asking questions. The near disaster had changed her view of humans. She watched them with new eyes, noticing things she had missed before. When crew members were well rested, they solved problems quickly and creatively. When they missed sleep, they became irritable and made mistakes. The connection between sleep and human performance was clearer to her now. Jun found Hana in the observation room, staring out at Earth below. "You've been quiet lately," he said, floating up beside her. "Is everything okay?" Hana turned to look at him. "I've been thinking about sleep, about how your brain works differently than mine." "Different doesn't mean worse," Jun said with a smile. "I'm beginning to understand that," Hana replied. "My latest report to the Commonwealth questioned our initial assessment of human sleep as a weakness." Jun looked surprised. "What did you tell them?" "That there may be benefits to your brain's shutdown cycle that we don't fully understand. The way you solved the oxygen system problem showed creativity that surprised me." Before Jun could respond, Captain Lee's voice came over the station's communication system. "Engineer Kim and xenobiologist Hana, please report to the airlock for scheduled maintenance spacewalk." Today they were supposed to check the station's exterior for any additional damage from micrometeoroids. It was routine work, but necessary after the recent impact. 30 minutes later, Jun and Hana floated outside the station in their spacesuits. The Earth hummed like a blue marble below them, clouds swirling across its surface. The vastness of space stretched out in all directions. "Stay connected to the safety line at all times," Jun reminded Hana as they moved along the station's hull. "And keep your communication channel open." They worked methodically, checking panels and looking for damage. Hana's sharp eyes caught small details that Jun might have missed. They made a good team. As they rounded the curve of the station to check Section F from the outside, Jun's foot slipped on a smooth panel. He grabbed for a handhold but missed. The motion sent him drifting away from the station, pulling his safety line taut. "Be careful," Hana called, but it was too late. The sudden jerk on the safety line caused its connection point to break free from the station. The damaged section had been weakened by the micrometeoroid impact. Now both Jun and Hana were drifting away from the station, connected to each other, but not to Harmony. "Control," Jun called into his radio. "We've detached from the station. Safety line broke at connection point Charlie 7. "Copy that," came the tense reply. Sending rescue team. Stay calm and conserve oxygen. Rescue will take approximately 3 hours. June checked his oxygen gauge. I have 4 hours of air left. Hannah. 4.5 hours, she replied. We should be fine. But as they floated in the emptiness of space, another problem emerged. The spin from June's initial push away from the station was causing them to slowly rotate. This meant their suit jets couldn't be aimed consistently to push them back toward the station. We need to stop this rotation, June said, but we have to be careful with our jet fuel. We might need it later. They tried using their suit jets to counter the spin, but the movement was too complex. After several attempts, they had used 20% of their jet fuel and made little progress. We should stop, Hannah said. We're wasting resources. June nodded inside his helmet. Agreed. Let's wait for rescue, but we need to conserve oxygen too. The physical exertion is making us use air faster. They checked their gauges again. The activity had reduced their oxygen reserves. I'm down to 3.5 hours, June said. You? 4 hours, Hannah replied. But rescue is still 3 hours away. That leaves little margin for error. They floated in silence for a few minutes, both thinking about their situation. I have an idea, June said suddenly. We can take turns entering a low oxygen consumption state. I can sleep, which will slow my breathing and heart rate. That will conserve my oxygen. But what about me? Hannah asked. My species doesn't sleep. June was quiet for a moment. Has your species really never tried to shut down consciousness? Not even as an experiment. It's considered primitive, Hannah admitted. Something our distant ancestors did before evolution improved our brains. But physically, is it possible? Hannah considered this. Perhaps. Our brain structure still contains the basic patterns for sleep cycles. They're just not used anymore. Then maybe you can try, June suggested. I can guide you into a meditative state. It's not exactly sleep, but it might reduce your oxygen consumption. Hannah felt uncertain. The idea of losing consciousness, of becoming vulnerable and unaware like humans did every night, went against everything she had been taught. I don't know if I can, she said. Just try, June encouraged. I'll stay awake first and watch over you. Then we'll switch. Reluctantly, Hannah agreed. As they continued to drift through space, June began to guide her. Close your eyes, he said softly. Focus on your breathing. Slow it down. Imagine each part of your body becoming heavy and relaxed. Hannah followed his instructions, though her mind resisted the process. Now let your thoughts slow down too, June continued. Don't try to control them. Just watch them float by, like clouds. As Hannah focused on her breathing, she felt something strange happen. Her usually active mind began to quiet. The constant awareness that her species maintained started to fade at the edges. That's it, June's voice seemed to come from far away. Let go of consciousness. Trust that your body knows what to do. For the first time in her life, Hannah felt herself slipping into something like sleep. It was frightening at first. The loss of control, the fading awareness. But then, as she surrendered to it, she found it wasn't scary at all. It was peaceful. Her consciousness dimmed, not completely gone, but significantly reduced. In this state, her breathing slowed and her oxygen consumption dropped dramatically. June watched the oxygen levels on her suit stabilize. Good job, Hannah, he whispered, though he knew she couldn't really hear him now. After an hour, he gently woke her. Hannah, can you hear me? It's time to switch. Hannah's eyes opened slowly. She felt disoriented, different. Her mind seemed to work in new ways. I think I slept, she said, amazed. Or something close to it. How do you feel? June asked. Strange. My thoughts are clearer somehow. I see connections I didn't notice before. She checked her oxygen gauge, and my oxygen consumption slowed significantly. Now it's my turn, June said. Keep an eye on us, okay? Wake me in an hour, or if anything changes." As June closed his eyes and allowed himself to drift into sleep, Hannah marveled at the experience she'd just had. In that semi-conscious state, her mind had made new connections. Ideas that had been separate before were now linked in ways she hadn't considered. She understood now what June had meant about the brain working differently during sleep. Her own brain had processed information in a completely new pattern, revealing insights about human biology and consciousness that she had missed before. When the rescue team finally reached them 2 hours later, they found both June and Hannah with plenty of oxygen to spare. Their taking turns at reduced consciousness had worked perfectly. Back on the station, after medical checks confirmed they were both fine, Hannah sat down to compose her final report to the Stellar Commonwealth. "I must challenge our previous assessment of human sleep requirements," she wrote. "What we viewed as an evolutionary disadvantage may actually provide unique benefits. The unconscious processing that occurs during human sleep appears to enable creative problem-solving and pattern recognition that continuous consciousness might not achieve. My own brief experience with a sleep-like state revealed neural pathways and connections that normal awareness had not discovered." She paused, thinking carefully about her next words. "I request an extension to my mission on Earth. There is much more to learn about this human trait. Far from being a weakness, sleep may represent a different kind of strength, an alternate form of consciousness that my species has lost through our evolution. Perhaps in our rush to remain constantly aware, we have sacrificed something valuable." That night, Hannah did something no member of her species had done in thousands of years. She asked June to help her prepare a sleeping area in her quarters. "Are you sure you want to try this again?" June asked as he helped her set up the sleeping bag. "Yes," Hannah said. "I believe there's wisdom to be found in dreams." As she settled into the sleeping bag and closed her eyes, Hannah reflected on how drastically her view had changed. She had come to study humans, believing her species was more advanced. Now she wondered what other human limitations might actually be strengths in disguise. Perhaps, she thought, as consciousness began to fade, shutting down isn't surrendering at all. It's a journey inward that we've forgotten how to take. For the first time, Hannah willingly embraced sleep, eager to discover what dreams might teach her about herself, about humans, and about the universe they all shared.